Okay. Yeah, good morning, everybody. Thanks very much for joining me this morning when on this Zoom call where we're going to take a look at lesson number 4. And that would include microclimates and zone maps. And yeah, then we'll take a look at any questions people have. So let us get on with that. I will just share our screen here. Oh, it's not quite what I wanted to do. Here we are. All right. Yeah, so we are going to look at lesson number 4, which it's pretty straightforward, but we're going to go through all this nonetheless and take a look at any questions anybody has. Which reminds me, I should just take a look at the Q&A document, make sure that, all right. We don't have any questions there today. Okay. All right. Yeah, so this lesson again is all about microclimates and zones. And I'm sure you've gone through and had a good look at some of Andrew's content on this, but we'll take a look at both. And as you can see, both are equally important. They have the same marks associated with them. So microclimates are just that. We're really wanting to look at your project site and how it relates to climate, and more so microclimates. So that could be wind, could be sun, could be moisture, all these things that may influence some of your designs, and whether that be the planting end, or perhaps it's where you choose to put a patio or to sit. So with that, what we want to do is also have you choose 5 different plants and identify those, including at least one tree or shrub that is currently on your site. And for most of you, that will be no problem. And on the odd brand new site, brand new build, that may be hard to find, but I think most of you be good in that department.
Jamie, quick question on that one.
Oh yeah.
I know that excuse me. I know that it says 5 on there. Typically, if you're doing this, are you cataloging all the plants on a given property when you're doing yours?
Yeah. Well, everybody's going to have their own process. What we do is we will document all the significant trees and shrubs, and we'll place those on a design sheet. And I'll find one today and show you guys what we do. So that's when we're sort of more, that's more, in some ways, more important when we're doing a renovation. So we want to kind of see what plant assets are on the site. And then we will go through each one and designate whether that plant would stay as is, whether we would move it to a new location, or whether it would be removed. So we kind of give it 3 different classifications. But yeah, and that can take quite a bit of effort on some projects to document everything. Now, on an acreage site, say an acreage site that has predominantly native forest around it, we don't do that. We'll identify that, yeah, this is a Douglas fir, primarily Douglas fir forest or a mixed forest, but we don't tend to identify each individual plant in that situation unless it is going to be close or part of some of the design process. And then we'll maybe want to know where each Douglas fir is, or cedar, or whatever it happens to be. So in this case, with the lesson number 4, we're just looking for 5 plants. But yes, if I would highly recommend that you identify all your significant trees and shrubs, and then we do a list of herbaceous plants. If it's a time of year where we can see what's going on, we'll draft up a list of those. We won't actually place them on the drawing because, you know, we're probably 99% sure those are going to get shifted, and then we can incorporate them into the new, you know, the renovated design. But you know, that can be a little bit up in the air, and that would really be based on some discussion with our clients, whether they want to retain these or not. So yeah, it can get quite tricky. We've had, you know, in the last decade or so, we've had a couple of projects where an immense amount of energy has gone into documenting existing plants. So you do have to be mindful of that when you're pricing.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Just bring up my chat here so I don't miss anything. All right, and maybe what I'll do is just pop that link into the chat in case anybody wants to use it. Uh-oh. There we go. Okay, get back on track here. So yeah, so we want a few plants on the drawing. And again, preferably at least 1 tree and shrub. And then you want to take a look, like all areas of your project site should have some designation. Okay, so if we go to the template file and we just kind of go to the right on that sheet, we'll see an example here. So you can see the project site boundary, and that every area outside of the house or buildings has a designation. So with some of your project sites, there could be quite a variation on, and you can see in this particular case, there is. And for some folks that have let's say an urban project site that's a little more open, such as this, you're going to see a bit less variation. Now you can sort of take this to different levels, right? But having a general idea of these microclimates is all part of our site analysis and a really important step to go through. My wife and myself, when we are putting together a design, we don't tend to document these on a design layer. It's more observational, and that's pretty much what we do. And as you'll see, as we go through the course here, we'll be, you know, showing you some of our deliverables that we provide for clients, and you'll probably be, you know, well, maybe not shocked, but maybe surprised by the fact that we don't go through every single step that is shown through this template file. I mean, we just couldn't. It's too massive an undertaking for a client. So that, but everybody has a completely different process. And again, one of the interesting parts of the course here, like if we go in and if we log in again, and I just go as I'm entering this class, on the left, you'll see there's a different set of menus here. So if you go to modules and we just go down to client interface, which is a bit of a funny title, but you can see that there's a number of different instructors here who have put together videos showing their design process, and everybody is completely different, right? So you might really enjoy looking at that, because undoubtedly anybody here on the call, if you're designing or you're going to design at, after the course, you're going to develop your own process that's unique to yourself. So yeah, back here at the microclimate assessment. So that's basically all we want to do. And we want to make sure when we're identifying plants that we want to also include the botanical or scientific name, because the reality is that's the only way to identify plants correctly. And having a common name with it is helpful. And I would say that's probably my weakness is common names, which sounds a bit funny, but the botanical names were drilled into me early in my life, and that's kind of what I've always drawn towards. So yeah, then we have our SWOT analysis, like we do on most of our assignments here. And we also want to go through this checklist, right? So we want to make sure that we have our north arrow, our title block on our design sheet, and you want every part of the map to have some designation and a little narrative. Then we want to make sure that all of these microclimates are included in the key here, which is the next page. Sorry, there's an attributes, and then there's the plant identification here. So those are a little bit separate. And then of course our 5 plants. So let me see what the example shows here. Okay, so with this student, what they've done is they've identified 5 different species of plants, but they have indicated where they are in the landscape, and some of them are numerously indicated. So you don't have to do that. You can just identify one. It's really up to you. I think at some point you'll find if you identify too many, that it'll get a little bit on the busy side. So this person here did 7. If you want to do more, that's completely up to you, but 5 is a good number. And I think it's a good exercise just to get used to that whole, it's all part of site observation, like what is there, what microclimate is there, what plants are there, and even sort of checking in beyond that to their general health, right? Which is going to make life a little bit easier when you make decisions on whether they stay or go. And then we want you to fill in that microclimate plant ID and your attributes, okay? So that's that first section where we're looking at microclimate assessment. And then our second portion of the assignment, we're looking at current zones. So again, this is an assignment where you want your whole project site has to have some zone designation. And if we go up to, there we go. There's an example here. And there's one as well for an urban site. Now, one thing I will sort of put out there as a cautionary note, and I do see this happen quite a bit, is when we get up into the higher zones, like zone 5 is generally, and let's go and take a look at the definition here, because Andrew put together this ebook quite a while ago, and I often reference it because sometimes we get a little bit of confusion over what zone 5 is, and my interpretation is it's an unmanaged wilderness area that requires no intervention. Okay, so you may pass through it, may walk through it. I mean, I have zone 5 on the property I live, and we love walking through it, but it isn't managed at all. We might take a fallen tree out of it, but generally no. So just throw that out there. Because I will occasionally see even an urban site showing a zone 5. And that is pretty much, that would be extremely rare. So do keep that in mind. Got a couple questions here. One from Sean. Can you let us know where we can find that resource? Well, what I'll do, I will see if I can just copy that link. There you go. So I just pasted it into the chat there for you, Sean. Yeah, it's a great little PDF or ebook. And same question from Jennifer. There you go. Okay. Yeah, so I think that is pretty straightforward. And we're not really going to get into what each and every zone is, because that's all part of your content that you're watching. But this is a little bit of a cheat sheet if you want to go through this, right? So pretty easy. And I would say for those that are on an urban site, you probably find a lot of that site is zone 1 and 2. And that is the case with this example. Whereas you get onto a larger site and it tends to be quite a different proportion. And then you're going to have some sites that might not be as clear. I think Chelsea's on the call, and her project site is if I'm not mistaken, a park, or yeah, I think it is a park. So that might be a little harder to figure out, but certainly any access pathways or roadways, obvious things like that are going to definitely fall into that zone 1. Yeah, so that is a little bit about that. So again, what we want to make sure is we have a title block with each of our design sheets, and that every area is designated. And you could argue in this particular example, not every area is designated. And yeah, probably should be, but there are limitations with the Google Slides graphics, so that might be something that you find a little tricky, and just do your best to meet that request here of every space having some designation, outside of the building. You don't have to put a zone 0 within the structure if you don't wish, but you can. That's completely up to you. Yeah, and then these all have to, of course, make sense. And there will be some interesting discoveries, I'm sure. We had one project where our client had, I guess it was about 3 acres, and they had a chicken coop, a nice little coop, but the coop was at the far end of the property. And typically, like our chicken coop is right at the edge of our zone 1 because we visit it 3 times a day, and it makes sense to have it fairly close to your dwelling, but you know, you don't want it too close. I wouldn't want it beside my bedroom window, for instance. But these folks had their chicken coop about 500 feet from their maybe not 500, probably 300. It was quite a ways. So that was an interesting discovery. They were not into changing the location, but yeah, so there could be some interesting discoveries for you. And frequency of pathways, that's an important one. And then we want to see where the gates and doorways are. So again, if we go through an example here, we see doorways here. I don't see any gates, so maybe there's not fencing in that particular instance, but and here we see a little bit of a one gate and entrance to the house. So yeah, that should be pretty straightforward. And we do have some resources here. As well. Now that's funny it's the plant ID chart for anybody who has any challenges with identifying their plant material. And then here is the rubric. So I always encourage people to take a look at the rubric as you are putting together your assignment, just so that you ensure that you've included everything, because this is what I use when I'm grading everybody's assignments. So if you've included everything that's asked, then you're sure to get full points or very close to it, if that's important. And let's see here. Yeah, that's about it. I don't think there's any questions by anybody on that. Okay, and this is one of those rare moments where I don't have any examples of my own to show you, because as I stated, we don't create zone maps or microclimate maps. And the microclimate, I think it's almost an automated thing for us when we go on a site. And then we spend a lot of time reviewing images and videos and any drone images as well. So we're doing the same thing, but not documenting it on paper or a electronic file here. So I don't again don't have any examples to show you, but these are a couple of good ones, and I think most people will get the gist of it. In this case, the base plan is at the bottom, and this is an overlay. So does oh, got a question here from Sean. You do your own drone surveying? No, we don't. In Canada, we have a few funny rules, and one of them is that if you're using a drone over a certain size, you have to have a pilot's license, or you have to have the initial steps of that. So it's not really practical for ourselves to purchase a drone, other than one that's just for taking photos and video. And for ourselves, we definitely like to have those high resolution images, but it's the photogrammetry or the LiDAR data that we're after. That's the main part of it. And we don't have that equipment now. I have two two sort of subcontractors that we use, and they're both a little bit different. One does a lot of work for forestry and mining and larger, like they'll even go into gravel pits to take take some shots of the gravel pit itself, and they use that to calculate their stock that they have on hand. It's very unusual, but I guess how else do you do it? You certainly can't guess by looking at it. So they make models based on what they discover there. So yeah, in the US, much easier. I don't think you have the same limitations, but drones are expensive. Like, well, I shouldn't say that. It really depends on what you're trying to do. And if we're on a, let's say we're on an acreage site that has a lot of tree cover, you know, you need, it's nice to have the ability to have LiDAR imagery so that you can basically see through the trees with that. We can, or the operator can do that. And basically, when we hire somebody to survey a property using a drone, we tend to get a little package afterwards, and that would include a point cloud and the high resolution images and an overall image that's been stitched together, as well as whatever contours we've asked for, which are typically 1 foot contours for a lot of our sites. On the flip side, sometimes we'll do our own contour creation using QGIS, and that is very, very helpful, but it's not exactly the most intuitive software, so you definitely need a little bit of training helping you out with that. Got a couple questions here. So Jennifer, so in terms of ethics, PC related to Zone 5, do you encourage people to create at least a corner of untouched area of wildlife? Well, you know, personally, that's a really good question, because there has been cases. We were contacted, fortunately the project didn't go forward, but we were contacted by a fellow who worked for the owner of an island off the east coast of Vancouver Island here, and it was old growth forest, and he wanted to turn this into kind of a permaculture villa, which sounds wonderful, but it would have entailed a lot of disturbance on the site, and that would have been really difficult. We did not go forward with that. But when we typically will go onto a site that already has a dwelling, maybe it has a barn and some outbuildings or a shop, you know, most of the time our clients are wanting to retain the forest that they have. So we don't really have to, you know, encourage people to do that. We have had projects where we've been called after a site has basically been leveled, right? So we've had that where we've had 5 or 10 acre site that's been logged off and bulldozed, and now the client's figured out that they're in trouble and need help, and you know, those are rather painful. But yeah, it is always better when people know what assets they have. So no, to answer your question, Jennifer, we don't really have to encourage people. We're always trying to hold on to those little precious spaces when possible. Now, saying that, I know we've been on our property 27 years, and that we have probably half a dozen second growth firs that are 60 to 80 years old, nice big trees, and we're not going to touch them. But if they were gone, our ability to grow annual vegetables would expand quite a bit. So it can be tricky, and it's a tough decision. It's a little bit of a balancing act. I think that we're quite successful growing our own food, in part because we're surrounded by different layers of vegetation. So we have a lot of untouched wilderness area. I shouldn't say it's wilderness. It's been previously logged, but it has regenerated. And we are deer fenced, so we don't have deer freely roaming through, but we do have a lot of other wildlife. We certainly have a bear that's coming through here every night. So hopefully that answers your question, Jennifer. Chelsea has a good comment here. Using drones professionally in the US does require FAA certification. All right. That is interesting. I wonder if, Chelsea, if that is for drones over a certain size or weight, or whether that's just a blanket. But it is a good idea, especially if you're getting a survey close to an airport. There's definitely a need to have authority authorization to do that.
Yeah, the FAA restriction is if you contract with anybody, so if you're being paid for a service to use the drone, even camera, video, photo, and it is just, as you said, restrictions for airspace, restrictions for, there's restrictions as far as places that you can and can't fly over. So yeah, you need to know all those regs.
Well, thanks very much for that, Chelsea.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Up here again, it's all to do with the weight of the unit, and I can't remember how many grams it is. It's like 90 grams. It's very, very small, which currently restricts the unit to be taking images. And there's a flight ceiling, which I don't remember either, but I think it's a couple 100 feet, maybe 300 feet. But yeah, it's definitely money well spent having that done. We don't tend to do drone surveys on urban sites, but certainly acreage sites, it can be very, very helpful in getting a better understanding of the site, and for the whole mapping process as well. Because mapping a big site can be tricky if you don't have images to go off of, particularly overhead images. All right. And you are welcome, Jennifer. Okay. Okay, does anybody have any questions about zones or microclimates? And you can unmute or pop that in the chat, whatever works best for you.
I got a question for you, Jamie.
Sure.
You mentioned you don't really use those. At least you don't like specifically write them down or put them in like a paired document.
Right.
It seems more like they're just like in your head as you're making your rounds on a property.
Yeah.
Can you help us in identifying how, maybe some examples of how we can specifically be taking these microclimates and overlapping zones towards that decision, so the design? Like what might an example look like? So that going through these processes means more in that sense.
Sure. Well, I will bring up design that we did, and we did the install on it. Okay. maybe what I'll do is I'll couple this with some photos. All right, so I'll just share my desktop here. Okay. Let me see, we'll get to the before images here. So this, it probably won't make a lot of sense, some of these images, but this is a back garden. We did the designed the whole property, but if we were looking at microclimates, this would be one example where we have, here's our sector map. And in that image, we're standing back here. This is, existing patio that was very old, and railway ties that were full of carpenter ants. But this is one example of a microclimate that was pretty easy to pick up when we were here, in that the previous owner of this property really focused their activities, outdoor activities, up in this corner here. Let's see if, yeah. And so this was their patio area. And it was easy to spot given red, but we knew that we were going to be heading up in this direction for a patio, right? So they wanted all this ripped out, and it was quite a big demo because there was a lot of concrete poured, and it was 30 or 40 years old. And back in the day, they used to use copious amounts of concrete and less steel. So this, we knew, was a hot little microclimate. And that's not only that, if we look at our sector map, we have noise and pollution on this side, and we're over here, and we have a little bit of a structure blocking that. If there's any other, those are obviously taken at different times. Here's another microclimate. This would be facing, I guess we're facing east here. We're right in this area. There's a sloped lawn area. So we know this is a nice little hot microclimate. At least it's getting the early sun. And clients wanted to be able to sit up here, and there's a street down below, as you can see there, but it is a bit of a dead end. But there's a berm here, and right on the other side of the berm is the highway. So the noise here is deafening. Even with a berm in place, it's just, it's really hard to work there. So in the back, these are kind of early shots where we had demoed everything. And then we're getting some Allen block in place, drainage behind the wall. And then an interesting thing happened here, and we're usually not making mistakes on drainage, but one of the people, in fact, I think it was this fellow here, who was working with a mason we've used for, oh gosh, a couple decades. They were doing all the drainage behind the wall, so there was perforated pipe and drain rock. So it's pretty straightforward, and it's straightforward as long as there is fall in the pipe. And what happened is this all got finished and looked great. And then right at our Christmas break, I got a call from our client. I'm just trying to find the photos. Sorry. I don't have them there. I don't know where they went. Anyways, we got a call at Christmas. Oh, we have this problem, water everywhere. We're like, what? And we showed up, and this whole back area of the patio, the new patio that was down, was completely covered in water, and water was just seeping out from the back of the wall. And we're like, wow, what's going on here? This is crazy. Because this was the first phase, just get the wall in, get the patio down. Next spring, it was looking at the soft landscape back here. So what happened was the installer, one of his people, or maybe it was himself, the drain pipe, as it was going around the back of this wall, didn't have fall. It started going in the other direction. So when water came, there's quite a bit of groundwater in this area. When it hit the back of the wall, at this point, it didn't have anywhere to go but through the wall itself. So there's a huge flood, and didn't hurt the house. There was no issue there. But the mason had to come back and disassemble the wall and redo the drainage, and wasn't very pretty for him. But he was able to fix it up, and it's great now. But again, this is a nice little corner. I'm not sure if I've really answered your question very well, Stefan. There are some things, like I must say, right now I'm assembling an online course that Javin Bernakovich and myself are doing on aesthetic design for ecological landscapes. And there's some things that I do when I'm designing that I'm not completely aware of, and I'm starting to kind of dismantle it because I'm having to break everything out into steps. And I would say this whole microclimate zone thing is one of those that it's just an automated process. Like I'm on the hunt for these little microclimates when we do site visits, because it's either going to be a place to put plants or people, and again, I don't document it, but I would say, any folks that are new to designing, it's probably a good process to go through. It might be a helpful process to go through. It may be helpful just to make some rough notes when you're there. Yeah, well, hopefully that helps, Stefan. I'm sorry about that if it's a little bit of a ambiguous answer.
That works. Thanks, Jamie.
Yeah. I'll get an E for effort. Let's see if there's something else on the site that I can. I guess another thing, Stefan, was in this back corner, right up in here, is where we got the most amount of light through the day, the best possible exposure for growing veggies. And we could tell that was the case, but we also have that Sunseeker app that we have on our phone that confirmed that. And that's indeed where we ended up putting a little enclosed veggie garden. Gosh, I don't know what's happened with I don't seem to have all my photos here, but yeah, we did this little deer-proof veggie garden for them. But again, that was all based on light level and the highest possible level of light, because their, believe it or not, their property line at the back ended, where is it? Ended right, right at not even the back side of the shed. The shed was encroaching onto parkland. So everything behind them is all park. And the previous owner used to own the entire, I think it's like 400 or 500 acres, and they parceled it all out, and this is what he was left with. Yeah, so it is misleading. So we couldn't do anything back here. No management, no, and a lot of deer traffic, lots of deer traffic coming through that area. So yeah, I've got another question here. Noah, did your team do the demo? Well, what we did on that, with the demo is we worked with an excavator operator. So we were on the, I don't know if we have many photos of the demo. It was quite ugly. Just in that there was a lot of wildfire smoke, and there was a lot of unknowns. So this project, we put it together on a fixed price, but the demo was not fixed because we had no idea what we were going to encounter. But yeah, we were on the ground with an excavator operator doing this, compact excavator, the same one that is shown right here. So it's quite small, but big enough to get around. Okay, and Jennifer, like, seen photos? Yeah, no problem. Oh, sorry, Noah. I noticed that was a direct message to me that the answer was to everybody there. So yes, we have a team, and we actually we didn't do an install this year. We did some designing, but no installs. And the reason for that is mainly more home-based. We had my father, my wife's father, and my brother-in-law all passed away last summer within a month, and that was kind of rough. And then we had my mother-in-law just passed away, and my mom's had some cancer surgery. So we're just kind of pulling back into the homestead and looking after family. So no work on sites for the last year, although we have people that want us. We're just waiting till the time's right. Maybe it'll be this spring, I don't know, but we do have other contractors that we have one contractor in particular that I can hand off work to, and she's got a great crew and does a really nice job. She does ecological restoration and has expanded into permaculture design as well as traditional landscape design. So we have people that can help out. Yeah. And thank you, Stefan. No problem. It's all an interesting journey. And I guess my wife and myself are getting to that age when, our parents start to run into trouble or finish off their journey. And let's see here. I should show you one thing just for fun. We'll have to show you this. We just got a wildlife cam the other day because we've had a lot of bear pressure. And part of the reason was we have a small orchard, and my mother-in-law passed away right at the fall solstice. And there was a lot of she's over on the mainland, so my wife was going over there quite a bit. So it really pulled us away from harvesting our own fruit. We got a couple good batches, and we made some cider, but the majority of our apples are on the tree. So this bear, there's two bears actually that have been coming in, and we ran into them during the day as well, but they've just been gorging on all these apples, and they're almost finished, thankfully. But we're having fun filming them and sharing the footage with family members that are over in Vancouver. They don't get to see bear too often there. In fact, I don't think there's any bear. We also get quite a bit of raccoon activity. You can see, oh, I guess it isn't on that one. Yeah, so had to show you that. Well, we have a few minutes left. And thank you very much, Nancy and Noah. Yeah, I love the bears too. And we certainly have had a fair share of bear contact in the last year. One morning we went outside and we had a large male in our chicken run going after the feed, and that was rather exciting. It didn't want to leave either, but they're for the most part, they're operating during the evening hours and not troubling us at all. So, and we're all deer fence, but they just climb over anything. Nothing's going to stop a bear unless it's electrified. So we don't have electric, and yeah, it's mainly black bears where I live. We have grizzly up at the north part of Vancouver Island, and hopefully they stay up there and they're not on their way down the island. But black bears are pretty good natured. So well, I've got a couple minutes left here. Maybe I'll just, if you want, I can just show you some of the deliverables on that job we've been looking at if you want. This is the original water layer we did. And as you can see, we've got some contour lines. This was one of those cases where we had a traditional survey done to the property. There was a need for a legal survey because the homeowner was not sure about the northern property boundary. And in fact, the way the house was built, the actual property boundary was about 3 feet in towards the house, much closer than the homeowner had envisioned. And there was I don't know if I have a picture of it. There we go. You can see quite a distinct chain link fence here. And that was the assumption that was the property boundary, but no, it's right where these stakes are. So it was a huge shock for the poor homeowners. Yeah, so here we're just looking at roof catchment, A and B, and what we're going to do with those, and some of the volumes. And they have beautiful roofing. They have a metal roof. And then we looked at some of the things that we're going to look at in our next lesson, lesson 5, where here we were looking at volumes on the roof and on some of the impervious surfaces around, as well as some impervious surfaces. So we took a look at those. We did a little what's called a micro watershed. So you can see all this park that's up in behind the property. It's all sloped and it all heads down towards this row of homes that are along the street here. And they do get a fair bit of groundwater. And that was one of the tricky parts on this project. But when we went to do this little rain garden in the front, we actually hit some pretty heavy a clay layer, and we I should show you what we did with that. We might not have time today, but so that's a design sheet we do sector, We do a water layer. Okay, so we prioritize the water. What are we going to do with that? And then we had an access layer here. So we end up looking at patios and retaining and walkways. And we've documented that. We're going to just retain the base of the slope. So we could plant that. And then we do a soil layer where we're showing planted areas, turf areas, because these folks wanted both, as well as an annual vegetable garden. And that's actually what the concept, initial concept looked like. And this changed a little bit. There's our planting plan. So we're identifying individual plants or individual plant symbols. And we're using Vectorworks here. I know for all of you out there, one thing I would highly recommend from a graphics point of view, because with land design, there's that whole piece of the learning to design based on all these incredible combinations of circumstances you can run up against on a project site. But the other is graphically, how do you represent all this so that people can understand what they're looking at? And somebody, and I hope Chelsea doesn't mind, but Chelsea's a landscape architect, and I believe, who's been a landscape architect for a couple decades. And if you want to see some really high quality graphics, check out her work, because it is very well done. And I hope you don't mind, Chelsea, me jumping in like that.
I don't mind at all. Not at all.
Okay, thank you for that. Again, a great example of, and believe it or not, when there was about 2.5 years where I worked for one of the larger landscape firms on Vancouver Island here, and I was doing some commercial estimating and project management. So I would have 4 or 5 drawings pass over my desk every week. And they're primarily landscape architect drawings. So I learned so much in that 2.5 years, just looking at what different people were doing in terms of their graphical approach. So yeah, I learned a lot that way. So I hope others can do the same. Just taking a look at some of Chelsea's work here. And that was we were doing this retaining wall, so we wanted to make sure we were staying within allowable height. So in the city of Nanaimo, where this job was going on, we had to stay under 4 foot for a retaining wall before we needed to use a structural engineer. So that's a cost we wanted to stay away from. And we were just able to pull it off with 4 feet. And of course, using a pre-engineered product helps. And that's Allen Block is. And it's a fascinating product because it's actually not so much the block that retains, it's the compacted aggregate behind the wall that creates that retaining structure. I'm trying to remember what that is. It's MSE, mechanically stabilized. Oh, yeah, I've lost it. But yeah, this great feature. Same premise with living walls. We've done a few of those in my life, but where we've done 16 and 12-inch. They're like a sock that gets blown with compost and seed, and then it's stabilized behind. So upslope is stabilized, much like an Allen Block wall is, and the living wall will germinate and they are quite beautiful, but they are tricky. We did one for a hospital nearby, and I don't think it fared particularly well in the long term because of the maintenance. It got burned off one year, and then as soon as you don't have vegetation on it, that changes everything. So, and these are just a few details on the veggie garden because it has a slope. And then, yeah, we'd made a change with the little rain garden. And just a little section for that, so we knew what we were doing. And these are super helpful when you're trying to figure out how you're going to pull it off, because we knew we had to retain uphill and we had to retain downhill. And then we ended up putting in a little bit of perforated pipe and gravel to, and this is basically just for the winter months. And we have a sliding gate valve that we can open and close on this. Yeah, so that was just a little spa these people wanted to place as well. All right. Well, I think we are at the end of our hour here, and thank you very much, everybody. Is there any other questions that anybody has before we sign off for the day? Okay. Well, best of luck with your lesson 4 assignment. And if anybody runs into any challenges and you need some help, feel free to drop me a note. What I'll also do here, I'll just put in the chat my calendar link, so that if you wanted to, if you feel you need a one-on-one Zoom, we can walk you through any challenges there. Whoops, sorry. There we go. Yeah. Well, thanks again, everybody. And I look forward to seeing your lesson 4 assignment next week, and have a great rest of your week. So you all take care.